I am a big pro wrestling fan, and I can think of nobody that I would rather talk to on the subject of professional wrestling than my guest today. He's got so many accolades, I don't even know where to begin, but I will just introduce him as the 4-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion and a WWE Hall of Famer. He is Double J Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett, welcome to the show, brother.
Man, oh man, Ricky, I appreciate that intro. And I don't know if today's interview is going to be me interviewing you or you interviewing me. I am so pumped to do this. I told my wife, Karen, she's just like, you're almost giddy. And we actually went by your studios last night in Horse Cave. That's where your studio. No, we drove by the Horse Cave exit last night, coming home from Lexington, Kentucky. And she was just like, you really are giddy. I said, you just really have no idea how I've connected. Never really spoke with him. We had a couple of email exchanges, but Rick, we've never spoken. But how I connected with your, I guess what you say, X account several years ago. So I'm pumped. I'm excited. And I really do appreciate you having me on today.
Well, man, I'm thrilled to have you. And yeah, we can just exchange questions if you want to. We'll throw all the regular interviewing rules out the window today. So ask me anything that you want to ask me. I'll tell you where I'm going to start. You bring up Horse Cave. You were trained by Tojo Yamamoto.
Oh, boy.
And let me tell you now, I'm going to take you back to a minor childhood trauma.
Okay.
All right. And this happened at the Horse Cave JC's building in about 1979. I went up to Tojo Yamamoto and I asked him for an autograph. I was about 7 years old. Tojo just looked at me, nodded his head. No, real sternly. It's not going to happen. I went back to my mom. I was like, man, he's mean. And now I look back on it and I appreciate it because that's exactly what professional wrestling should be, Jeff. He should have been turning my little timid 7-year-old butt down. Tojo Yamamoto right there. See?
And Tojo, and for the listeners, and I'm sure there's several out there that don't know who Tojo Yamamoto is. He was Hawaiian born, but in this area that me and part of the country that me and Ricky are from, he was very stereotypical Japanese wrestler. He was about 5'2", wore wooden block shoes to the ring, had a judo chop, very mean, very vicious, and he loved to kayfabe, as we call it. He loved to go along with the stories. He would not be nice to anyone. He used to go grocery shopping at midnight back in the day, so he didn't have to interact with the public. People hated him. They cut his tires and all that, but I can only imagine Tojo. But no, I was lucky enough to be around him. He was my dad's business partner and tag team partner through all through the 70s. And Tojo was a unique guy, but I can imagine a little young Ricky scared the shit out of you, right?
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, and I hated him even worse after that, which is the point, right? Now, I grew up on Memphis wrestling. I grew up on it, and your dad ran the Memphis territory for years and years. Channel 3 out of Louisville.
That's what I was going to ask you. Okay.
Every Saturday morning, that was it. My mom would make me biscuits and butter and jelly, and I would take a cold glass of milk, and I would set up right in front of Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. And I mean, I ate it up. Your grandfather, Eddie Marlin, I have so many memories of, probably that damn Jimmy Hart, bringing some of his guys out, and they're laying somebody out in the studio, and poor Lance Russell so disgusted, saying, can somebody get Eddie Marlin out here? Can somebody get Eddie Marlin out here?
I love it.
I mean, I grew up on it, man. That is what made me love professional wrestling. And people ask me, they say, what are your favorite sports? And of course I love football and baseball and basketball and all that stuff. But my answer is always a really weird one, because I tell people my two favorite sports are professional golf and professional wrestling.
Okay.
I'm a complicated man, Jeff.
You are.
So can you talk a little bit about what it was like in those days? Because you grew up Wrestling was in your blood from the time you were born, really.
Yeah.
What was it like in that era? And can you explain to people who aren't acquainted with what Memphis wrestling in the 70s and early 80s was actually like? Because it was a whole different world. You were talking about people slashing tires, and if you were a heel in the old days, I mean, you had to keep your head on a swivel, because a lot of those big old boys that would come out to the shows, they thought they wanted a piece of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially, Ricky, for those who don't know, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, live in Hendersonville. That's where I'm at. And Louisville, Kentucky is about 170 miles north, obviously, of Nashville. Ricky comes from about halfway in between. That's why I was wondering, did you watch the Nashville TV or the Louisville TV? And it was Wave TV. And look, in the 70s, even in the early 80s, we're talking, as everyone knows, prior to cable television. So there was no national promotion. There was no WWF or WCW. It was Memphis Wrestling. And we didn't even call it Memphis Wrestling back there. It was just wrestling, championship wrestling that came on, Ricky, like many other kids. And there's so many stories like that. And I was one of those kids that, even though my dad was a promoter, hell, he didn't smart me up. I'm not sure I'm still smartened up completely to this business, but people believed in it. It was so much more protected and maybe a lot more simpler in the production values, but it was still good versus evil. And again, you're from Kentucky. It goes without saying, it's big blue basketball country, Georgia or Tennessee or whatever. It's the college sports. The pro teams in this area weren't, but wrestling was 52 weeks a year, every Saturday morning. And we had a regular stop. And so growing up, we did Memphis TV, or the business ran. It did live, 90 minutes live in Memphis. The ratings to this day, nothing will ever come close to it. I mean, the week that the old show, and this probably fits in with your X account, the show Dallas, that set monster ratings on that Friday night. Of course, it was the highest rated show for the entire quarter. Wrestling beat it every week. The ratings for Memphis Wrestling every Saturday morning, whether you were in Nashville or Memphis or Louisville or Evansville, and that was kind of the loop, as we called it. It was different pockets too, Jackson, Tennessee, and other markets. But, it was what the folks in this area did. They watched it every Saturday morning. And, Memphis was run live every Monday night at the Mid-South Coliseum, every Tuesday at the Louisville Gardens, Wednesday, Evansville Coliseum, Saturday, Nashville Sports Arena. So it was just a weekly staple form of entertainment. My grandmother used to say, they like, what is professional wrestling? And they would say, and I've always loved this, and to me, it's still true to this day. It's Shakespeare to the masses. A golf fan, as no disrespect, but you kind of got to know the game, and why is this guy hitting a 3-wood and this iron and this, that, and draw it in, and all the nonsense of the greens are slow or fast. I still don't understand it, but hockey, but they're all still kind of niche. Wrestling, it's pretty simple. There's a good guy. Here's a bad guy. We hope the good guy kicks the shit out of the bad guy because he double-crossed him. Real simple form of entertainment. So Shakespeare to the masses fit, and it still does to this day. But back in those days, it was so much more wholesome and pure and clean. Again, way before social media and way before cable television. Probably in your area, did you get it on rabbit ears? You had to, right? And you got the big antenna out in the backyard to get Wave TV. That's how you consumed everything. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of options either.
Yeah, before we had cable, we called it Channel 3 wrestling.
There you go. See, that's what I'm saying.
I was so uneducated, I didn't even know it was the Memphis territory. I knew that the big matches were happening there because that's where Jerry Lawler was taking care of business.
There you go.
but I didn't realize. But man, Campbellsville, Greensburg, Park City, Cub Run.
There you go. Glasgow. How far is Glasgow?
Glasgow was about 15 minutes from me.
That's what I'm saying. And that was a regular stop on the loop for us. Even in, I broke in and actively wrestled, started in 86. And 86 to 93, I bet I wrestled in Glasgow, I don't know, 100 times at least, a lot, there at the Armory. So it was just a regular stop.
Yeah. And you're talking about how it was a more innocent time, and that's absolutely true. But at the same time, there was realness to it. I mean, kayfabe you referenced earlier. I mean, pro wrestling going way back was built on the idea of we're going to make this look as real as possible. And that is how it's being presented. And obviously the modern wrestling is still great and people love it. And I mean, you're still thriving, man. You look like $1 million. Love to see your stuff because you still, to me at least, you bring that old school psychology to it still. Yeah. And so, I'm always interested in your matches and in your segments. But back in the day, can you talk a little bit about what it was like? Because being a heel in the South and, anywhere really, but being a heel in the South, I mean, I remember one time being in Campbellsville, I think it was Campbellsville, Kentucky. And I can't remember who all was wrestling. I know Bobby Eaton was in the match. This is back when he was still brown-haired.
Yeah,
Bobby Eaton.
Beautiful Bobby brown hair.
Yeah, and there was a big old country hoss, somewhere between 250 and 300, just one of those big country strong guys, wearing a pair of overalls. And he would get up periodically holding his folding chair that he was in. And he was into it and he was ready to hop in and help somebody out if it came to it. And I remember Bobby Eaton was keeping an eye on him from the ring because you didn't know what kind of crazy you were going to walk into, So, and I've heard, Jim Cornette tell stories about, people shooting bleach from a water pistol and I'm trying to put super glue on your keyhole of your car or whatever. Can you talk about how wild it got? Because there were occupational hazards.
Oh, more than the stories that I heard through the years, and that was something about Tojo. And look, and a lot of people, I guess in a lot of ways, Ricky, people just kind of miss the point. But professional wrestling, at the end of the day, it's all about being emotionally connected. No different than your home team, whether you're the Patriots. That was your team. Tom Brady's your guy. You lived, breathed, and ate them. You were connected to the brand. Well, that's how professional wrestling was. You were connected to the good guy. And Jerry Lawler was your guy, or whatever area of the country you're for. There's your good guy, and then the antagonist, if you will, the bad guy. And again, it was just a different era. You didn't have video games that depicted, Grand Theft Auto shooting and killing, and your local news didn't have cameras out in the field where you saw all this violence. It was such a more closed-minded. The violence you saw was a school fight or maybe a bar fight. Well, in professional wrestling, you have guys good versus evil, and they're going at each other. So people would get emotionally involved in the storylines that they saw on Saturday morning. When you come to town, get a couple of cold ones out in the audience rolling. And if you see a fight in a bar and something happens and your favorite is maybe done wrong, the emotion carries over. And it happened all the time. I mean, to this day, it's happened to me and Karen in Mexico multiple times because just culturally, no disrespect, it's just different down there. Well, it's kind of like it was here in the 70s. And again, I broke in '86, so I heard all the stories, but the riots and it happened in my day, some in the 80s quite a bit, but nothing happens like that today just because cat's out of the bag, can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But the emotional connection, the riots, the people waiting out back, and Lawler tells a great story that, a guy when Lawler was a big time heel through the years, and guys would wait out back for Lawler and they would show him his gun in his waist pocket. And Lawler's like, hey, I don't want no trouble. That's kind of the emotion that was brought out. Bricks through windshields, and it was just a different outlaw day, if you will. I mean, we could go on. And Ricky, I'm sure you're having listeners, viewers today that go, these guys are out of their freaking mind. But no, folks, we're telling the truth.
Yeah, I mean, heck yeah, and I read the Bill Apter magazines and all of that. So I was aware that there were different territories and in general, but we got one of those humongous satellite dishes in the late 80s, one of those big NASA deal. And I remember I was watching, it was World Class. I think it was still world class at the time. And Lawler was, working as a heel there. And I grew up on, and I know he had some heel moments in Memphis here and there, but he was predominantly the baby face.
You're right.
And or at least once he turned and became the baby face, he was the baby face. And I remember him cutting a promo on this world class, and he was talking about Texas losers. He was like, "You're just a bunch of Texas losers." He said, "I went by a house and I saw toilet paper hanging out on the clothesline. You just Texas losers." And I remember it was a moment for me, because I was like, wait a minute, this isn't heroic Jerry Lawler that I grew up on. He's going in there to do an entirely different job. Now, Jeff, you are, I think, one of the great heels. The psychology of being a heel, I could pick your brain about that all day. I know that when you were young and you first broke in, you were this white bread baby face, this underdog kid,
Way back when.
Yeah, way back when. And I've heard you say that, being a heel is the role that you relish more. But can you talk a little bit about the difference? Because I really do believe, Jeff, that wrestling is an American art form. And I know it's not just in America. It's an art form in Japan. It's an art form in Mexico, other places. But I don't think that it gets enough credit for being sort of like, it's opera for the people. It is a morality story for the people. And can you talk a little bit about what goes into that? Because there's a lot that goes into your craft. You don't just go on TV and talk shit and you're a good heel. There's a psychology to it. Can you talk about how you've refined that through the years?
I guess I am. A lot of folks used to say, Cornette was the first one I heard say it. I had the greatest blessing and curse. My father was the promoter, was the greatest blessing and the greatest curse. But there's two sides of that. But me, born and raised in this business, and being able to kind of be around so many things, and a lot of things I've learned by almost osmosis. But at the end of the day, you're right, it's a craft. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with actors or actresses or stunt men or stunt women, and even pro athletes. Frank Wycheck, God rest his soul, former Tennessee Titan, he came through the curtain after a show that he wrestled at for me at TNA. He said that's physically the hardest 15 minutes that he's ever done, because yes, it's scripted, choreographed, if you will, but it takes a different mindset, and you have to think about so many different things, knowing that, okay, this is going to hurt like hell, and I've got to do this and I've got to do that. But you also got to connect with your audience, and you got to portray different emotions throughout a 15-minute, 20-minute, 25-minute match. And the real skill, folks, and look, I put Jerry Lawler at the very, very top of it. And we could go through a list of guys from the 70s that I've really looked in. A guy named Fabulous Jackie Fargo that probably visited Horse Cave a few times. Those guys often taught me that, when you're in the ring, you don't perform for the guy on the front row. You perform for the guy on the very back row, and let them know your emotion, whatever it is. So body language is important, but it is a craft. It truly is. And, the era we're talking about, 70s, wrestling was almost a 4-letter word. Look, I was in elementary school in the 70s, and the amount of times I got laughed at, and your dad does what, and this and that, because it really wasn't socially accepted. We were begging and dying and pleading to be a part of pop culture. Well, fast forward now to 2024, and you've got Shaq or Mike Tyson or Logan Paul or Bad Bunny. I mean, wrestling is pop culture. You got NFL teams, with the championship belts. That didn't, they didn't come from boxing or MMA, and that's cool. But wrestling now, if you look at politics today, it's a wrestling promo through and through. No matter how you slice it and dice it, Trump has a playbook out of professional wrestling. But the whole art form is what me and you are talking about. And it really is a sense of, I like to say that, there's Hollywood, and then there's television, and then there's Broadway. And wrestling really is a hybrid of all three of these. You got to have athletic ability, but that almost stand-up vaudeville interaction that you got to have to ad lib. The real greats can get in the ring with a blank sheet of paper and listen to the audience. The musicians and Toby Keith, good buddy of mine, obviously passed away, but he used to tell me about the different being able to have an ear. And I said, yeah, that's exactly like wrestling. You have to be able to understand. Me and you could walk into an arena and listen to a wrestling match. I can assure you, I'm hearing different something that you're hearing. It's because I'm trying to get a vibe of how are the people we're going to stand? What do they want to hear? What don't they want to hear? And it's really something that you have to learn and think through and be taught. And look, what's crazy is I used to love to wrestle in Louisville, Kentucky, because they loved the underdog babyface. That's just, as soon as I started getting my ass beat, the people started chanting. That's just the Louisville crowd. The exact same opponent, the exact same almost match and setup and buildup in Memphis, Tennessee, those folks, the minute I started getting my ass beat, they're saying, get your butt up and kick ass. They wanted to see a kick-ass baby face. And there really is a different nuance. And so I call it the pros have to get in the ring, and you've got to understand whether you're a heel or baby face, what does this crowd want? And that's an art.
And that's fascinating, because Memphis and Louisville, it's not like they're worlds apart.
Not at all.
But the culture of the fan there is different, and I don't know why that is.
I have no idea.
Think that's very interesting that they could be that different. I want to talk about your dad for a second, who I think everybody who is a big wrestling fan, at least of my age or whatever, knows what a wrestling genius Jerry Jarrett was. How much did he clue you in when you were? Because I've heard you say, and it was hard for me to believe that, you weren't as smart to the business as a kid as somebody might assume that you would be.
Not at all. Ricky, I'll tell you a story, and just a quick time out. I had no idea that you were this knowledgeable and long-time wrestling fan. I mean, you're a girl dad at 5. You're a professor. You talked about golf and your X account, but I had no idea. I'm blown away. With that being said, my parents divorced when I was 3, so I would visit my dad summers and weekends and go to shows with him and all this. But I was about 10 years old, and I spent the night with him out at his house, actually right around the corner in Hendersonville, the house he used to live at. I was downstairs, and right by his office, right by the bedroom that was my bedroom, was one of his little kind of small offices. Well, like any 10 or 11-year-old kid does, I'm going to just start snooping around. And I pulled out some papers that start looking at, okay, this week Lawler against so-and-so and Dundee against so-and-so, and then turn the page. Oh, the next week this is happening. Oh, wait a minute. The next week this is happening. And then I started decoding a few things like, wait a minute, that may be, I don't remember, but I kind of like started putting pieces of the puzzle together, never said anything. And then one time there was a snowstorm right in this same kind of area where all of a sudden the guys had to come by the house to pick up their checks, because most of the time they got paid on Wednesdays at Evansville or wherever. The checks would be brought to the show. Well, the show got canceled or whatever it may be. And so guys started popping by at the house. And all of a sudden I say, okay, there's a good guy. Okay, there's a bad guy. Wait a minute. They're actually talking out in the driveway. Just little things like that. And I'm going, now, wait a minute. But I never really said anything. But as time went on, it finally, that was kind of his mindset, that I almost by osmosis. And then he started asking questions. But, I was 12 years old before he really tried to even begin to say, hey, son, this is a business. Keep your mouth shut. What you see out here doesn't go back to school. But that was about the extent, as opposed to, just a wide open, just little by little. But, then I was a little pissed off, little maybe resentful. I get it now. I'm so grateful the way I was kind of brought into it. My grandmother, she was a promoter, did all the towns, and she used to say, keep your mouth shut. It was just the nature of the business.
God, I love that story so much. It's like a Santa Claus story.
Yes.
You figured it out the same way that we all figured it out. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's amazing. And Vince McMahon, gets the credit or the blame, as the case may be, for, turning it into the world of entertainment and the rock and wrestling. And by the time Cyndi Lauper and all that came, and of course it's gone so far beyond that now. You were talking about Shaq and Bad Bunny and all of that stuff. But your dad was really ahead of the then WWF with Andy Kaufman, because I mean that cut through into the mainstream media in a way at the time, 1982, more than anything that I'd ever seen, and I think maybe that anybody else had ever seen either. And of course, a lot of people listening to this hopefully know about when Jerry Lawler smacked him right there on Late Night with David Letterman, and of course the pile driver, and Kauffman sold it by wearing the neck brace around for a long time after that. What are your memories of Andy Kaufman coming to Memphis and that particular time where y'all actually got a lot of national publicity out of that?
It was, and we've done a couple of Tales of the Territory. We talked about it, and there's been different, really in depth, and a lot of people forget the footnote is that Kauffman, big Hollywood actor, Taxi was red hot and New York based, and he went to Vince McMahon's father, Vince Sr., and pitched and conned and let me do this. They wanted no part of it. That it just wasn't. The thing that, necessity is the motherhood of all invention. Tennessee, this area, we couldn't compete financially paying the stars that a Northeast town or maybe the mid-Atlantic area or even Dallas. So my father and Jerry Lawler was his business partner. They had to think of things out of the box. And so the first scaffold match that is modern day, that was my old man's mindset. He did that in the 70s in Louisville. So there's different innovations through the years, really using music as a part to help talent get emotionally connected to their audience. But the Kauffman thing, I still think is one of the most fascinating stories in the history of professional wrestling. In the intricacies that Andy really went to, he never cashed a check. My dad wrote him checks. When Andy passed away, there was times the bookkeeper was like, "Hey, Andy, you haven't cashed anything." He said, "I'll get to it." But he never cashed a check. He loved the art form, which is so cool. But, Lawler slapping Kauffman on the Letterman show, and Letterman didn't have a clue. And very few people know this, that in the Letterman circle, they call that the wrestling episode, which actually skyrocketed their ratings. It was such a big pop culture moment that who is this wrestler? Lawler wasn't a huge national brand, and he slaps Andy Kaufman, a big TV star, and just everything that goes with it. But those two guys, and I say those two, there was really my father, Lawler, and Kaufman that were the brainchild that put it all together. But Dutch Mantell, legendary wrestler, he was on the cards every week. He didn't want to know what the story was. He just wanted to watch it appear. So that whole storyline was, as we say, super kayfabe. Not a lot of folks knew. Andy was willing to wrestle women as a shoot for real out of the audience. Just the whole backstory and how that came to fruition, and Andy's love and passion. But at the end of the day, yes, he had passion, but he understood that this is an art form that I'm going to emotionally connect with this audience, especially being a Hollywood actor. I'm going to connect with Memphis, Tennessee, and he put on the Southern accent and really dogged the people, and it just resonated. I got to personally see the event in Nashville, which is, you couldn't cram another human being in that building that night. But again, it made the audience connect that here's this Hollywood actor talking about Channel 3 wrestling. People were offended that this Hollywood taxi star is making fun, not of Jerry Lawler, but really making fun of them. And so that emotional connected said, yeah, I'll pay money because I want to see his ass get beat. It was really that simple. But my God, it really was pop culture meets professional wrestling for, I don't say the first time, but one of the first times in a real national way.
His promos were so genius.
Oh gosh.
This is called soap.
Yes.
It was, it was so, it's no wonder they wanted to strangle him. He
Yes.
He truly was an artist. So Jeff, let me ask you. Let's flash forward in time. The internet. I got the internet in 1996. I think in Horse Cave for the first time that I had it. And of course, that opened up a whole new world of information and rumors and talking about this and talking about that. And it's not long after that the Monday Night Wars began. How did the internet change the business? And obviously, that era, late 90s to early 2000s, is one of the most fondly remembered and most successful eras in pro wrestling. And it doesn't seem necessarily like it would have automatically gone so well because, again, going back to kayfabe, now kayfabe has been punctured in a way that the toothpaste is out of the tube now and you can't put it back. Did you have any concerns? I mean, being one of the best guys in the business at that time, did you have any concerns over how the world was changing and if that was going to really damage professional wrestling?
Late 80s, Vince McMahon basically squirted the toothpaste out. He didn't want to pay the sports tax in Jersey and other places. And so he said, we're predetermined, we're scripted entertainment, we're sports entertainment. And so it really started late 80s into the 90s. And as you talked about the internet, and I really think there's, in a lot of ways, I don't say they call them completely different, but I think you'll know where I'm going from it. When the internet got going and there were, AOL Messenger and chat boards, and yes, there were these small groups, but truly, Ricky, there were tape traders, there were magazine, Dave Meltzer's of the world, Wade Keller's, the journalist. That goes back way back. And so it was a small, real segment of society. The internet just kind of got that a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and the Attitude Era took off and rolling. When social media came along and you had the ability to instantly exchange information on a very wide, I think there's really two phases. And I think we're in the middle of another, I don't call it transition, but the business is red hot because there are so many things, and you can be a fan of Japanese, Mexico, WWE, AEW, Impact, TNA, Ring of Honor, all at the same time. That didn't exist. So I was never worried. I was always curious because Vince had a vision. Let's go national, and we are entertainment. And how are we going to connect with the audience? And so, look, I was still in my 20s in the 90s. And God almighty, Ricky. But anyway, think, in those times, in that it just became, WrestleMania began to get quite a bit of traction. And yes, it had early, but, WCW, not just a little traction. It was, Monday Night Football ratings were hurt because of the Attitude Era Monday night shows. So more people were watching it. And so the old timers, and I'm calling my dad, that generation, you could tell, and I had these conversations, and my dad at times would say, yeah, they would be the biggest complainers about it, but they're also the ones that realized, look at the amount of money made today versus the generation prior. So there was always, and there always will be kind of that audience, oh my God, the business is going to die. No, it's not. It's just the art form. It is, and this sounds silly from a third generation promoter, but I do believe this. And I think the art form is still at the essence of what we do. And I don't want to call it pure, but it is an art form. And as long as that is around, the foundation's around, I think the business will continue to grow because just look at where we're at today. We just came back from Wembley, 55,000 people in Wembley Stadium. It's big. It's really big. So I was a student of the game and was taught that from an early age, but always had different questions. And when I started TNA, I knew then when I wanted to start something, I said, the business, it's not going to get smaller because it's never gotten smaller, ever in the history. It comes out of, you really do your time. Before TV, it was in fairs and festivals around the country and traveling, a tiny little business, but it existed. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
All right, I'm going to ask you one more question. I have hogged this conversation, and you said you had some questions for me, so I'm I'm gonna shut up and give you your turn.
I know. I love this. I'm
having too much fun.
You're this big a wrestling fan.
Oh God, I am. So I've had this one circled on my calendar. I kept asking Ernie, when's Jeff Jarrett again? It's in a couple of weeks. Calm down.
Right.
By this point in your career, how many folks do you reckon that you have horse collared with the guitar by this point in time?
A lot. It's funny how all that, the different guitar shots, Beetlejuice. I mean, and I've told this story a couple of times. I've got 5 kids. I had a middle schooler. She's no longer, now she's in college, but she came home from school. That happened in 99 or 2000. And she's like, Dad, what is this? It was on I think on those days it was a Vine or something. And but just the pop culture moments, that guitar shots, whether it's Moolah, there's just a fascinating stories about it. But the head count, I'm going to leave that up to journalists out there to figure it out. It's a lot. I can assure you that.
Yeah, we got to be well up into the hundreds.
Yo, for sure.
I would think. All right, man. Look, hit me with anything here. I'm an open book. I don't think I'm as interested as you are, but
yeah, the heck you. So what was Tweet One? I know that's a passé name, but how did it all come about? I'm fascinated.
Yeah, I was on Christmas break from college, the community college. Yeah, which I just resigned from that job last month. It's been about a month ago to do this.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah,
hey,
crazy.
Let me stop you on that. When I read that, so my dad's, and you've already mentioned him, that whole side of the family is wrestling and entertainment and promoters. My mom's side of the family is all education. There's a couple of middle schools named after, so all education. And so when I heard Brother Ricky is resigned from teaching to go into, I just thought back on my career. So,
anyway. Yeah. And I mean, I love teaching, but I never got to talk about Tojo Yamamoto even in the classroom. So it feels like an upgrade. No, man, I was on Christmas break. It was Christmas Eve of 2013 was the first tweet, because Twitter always reminds me X now. Old habits die hard. You're doing a better job of calling it X than I am. But I created it just for fun. And the first tweet was a birthday shout out to Jack Ham, the old Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah. And it got like no retweets and 2 likes.
Yeah.
And that's what it was like for the first year, probably, or year and a half. I look back on it now, Jeff, and I don't know why I kept going, because in that first year, I had almost no audience whatsoever. If I got 5 retweets or 15 likes, that was a good tweet for me in the beginning. So I don't know why I stayed with it, but man, I'm glad I did.
And then we connected on X, and we had an email exchange, and I didn't follow up probably, but because I was like, I want to do this, because I want to pick your brain, because at the end of the day, you created an audience out of thin air. I mean, how did you in the early days, and I imagine, or maybe it hadn't changed, how did you create your content or find your content? Because your thought process is, whether it's a Brady Bunch or a Evil Knievel, all that kind of stuff, we're close to the same age. I mean, if you're older, it just resonates. I'm like, yes, I've thought the same thing. The Kool-Aid Man or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
How did you find your content?
Well, it was just digging on the internet. Honestly, it was just digging. I would put in, I always joke with people that I had the most disturbing internet browser history that, not involved in pornography.
Yes,
could have been, because I would go in. I looked at it like a slot machine.
Okay.
So I'd go in. I'd type in William Shatner, 1977, Milwaukee Bucks, Kool-Aid Man, July or whatever, and just crank the wheel and see what pictures would come up. So the first few years, it was a lot of time just spent trying to find pictures. And then as I started doing it, people would help me out some and send me pictures. You sent me a picture one time a few years ago. I think it was, it might've been Flair and Roddy Piper in a car.
Okay.
And I think you just said, do your thing, or something like that when you sent it to me. So yeah, people, kind of look out for me now. And if they see something they think I can work with, they'll send it to me. But in the beginning, it was just going out there and trying to find stuff that was worth talking about. And I never, Jeff, I'd never expected it to become a thing.
Wow.
I thought that I would just do it for fun. I thought I was going to teach until I was 65 and then get the gold watch and be done with it then. But something about it resonated with people. And I was the most surprised person, man. I always tell people I have taken the weirdest midlife detour that I could think of. And man, I'm grateful for it every day, dude. I truly am. It's been the biggest blessing in my life, other than my children.
I mean, what a story of hard work and passion and perseverance and maybe divine intervention. But I don't say it's the reason, but one of the reasons I started TNA, yes, there was a void in the marketplace. I saw the opportunity. I'm a third generation promoter. But Ricky, I said, I need to figure out to do something where I'm not wrestling at 57. What the hell is going on? I'm wrestling at 57. So we never know where life's going to take us.
Dude, you're so damn good at it, though. I mean, I wasn't flattering you earlier. No false flattery, man. I mean, you still look great. You're still on top of your game. You might not feel as great the day after a match as you did 25 or 30 years ago. But dude, you live one time, and to me, you're still at the top of your game. Enjoy it while you can. Like I said, I love to watch you because for me, you're a connection to a different breed. And so I like I say, I love your matches and your segments the most, and I enjoy AEW. I don't watch as much wrestling now as I did when I was 12 years old, but
you got 5 kids. I got that.
Yeah.
I got 5 kids. All right, last question.
Yes.
Yeah, because I could go down all kind of rabbit holes on all that, and I do appreciate the compliments. But Clay, he's a Nashville boy, started out on Sports Talk, and obviously built the empire that you're currently working under. How did those paths cross? Like, this is going to be the most fascinating because, OutKick and the whole team is, I knew them when it was, I hate to say this, the beginning of a website and then how it's grown through the years. How did that happen?
Yeah, we had a mutual friend, and I didn't really know Clay, but had a mutual friend and was aware of Clay and was aware of when it was OutKick the coverage, and was, aware of what he did, and, thought he was a smart guy and was interested, that obviously he was building something. And I got reached out to by Gary Schreier. Gary kind of hates it when I talk about him on the show, I think. But Gary, I'm talking about you again, who oversees OutKick for Fox. And he reached out to me last year, and we had a couple of conversations. And obviously, moving out of teaching is a pretty wild thing to do. And I was really in that comfort zone because you've got tenure and you've got that job security, and you've been doing it for 21 years. My oldest daughter just graduated college last year, and she was a baby when I moved to Chicago to take my teaching job.
Yeah.
And so it was a big change, and I definitely had to think about it. But Gary would check in with me periodically, and we got back in touch this year, and I ended up talking to Clay, and he said that they'd really like to have me. And, he was a fan of what I do. And we had a really nice conversation. And I thought, you know what? You get one bite at the apple. And if all these tweets that I've done for 10 years, man, and God, I haven't taken a day off, Jeff, not one day off. And I thought, what have I really been doing all of that for if I pass on this opportunity to come to OutKick? So it ended up happening. And my buddy Ronnie, who you're not going to get to meet today, but is my sidekick on this show, he was the mutual friend. And he tells me sometimes, he's like, I can't believe how these worlds have collided, because he knew us separately. And now And now here we are, and he's kind of in the middle of it himself on this show every day too.
Dude, huge congrats. Look, the OutKick,
Thank
if
you.
they ever need a wrestling vertical, I know they're, I'll say diplomatically, transitioning out of the wrestling business, it appears, in the big umbrella. But if they ever need a wrestling vertical, the Double J and Ricky, or the Ricky and Double J wrestling show, buddy, let's do it.
Oh my God. From your lips to God and Clay Travis's ears.
There you go.
I'm all in, man. I'm all in.
We'd have a blast, man.
Yeah, let's pitch it to him sometime.
Let's do it.
Well, brother, man, I can't tell you how much fun this is. As I said, I was looking forward to it, and it's been even more fun than I was expecting it to be. So I can't thank you enough, man.
No, appreciate your time. Appreciate you having me on. It goes without saying, I'm a huge Ricky Cobb fan.
Well, likewise, my brother. I've been enjoying your work for a long time, and long may it continue. As long as you decide you want it to, I'm going to be tuning in and watching you do your thing. Thank you, man.
I appreciate it. That's JEFF, JARRETT. That's Double J, Jeff Jarrett. Now choke all that, slap nut Ricky.
Hey, OutKick fans on YouTube, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button and make your way over to OutKick.com where you can watch the full episode.